It's great to see all, a bunch of familiar faces back live and in person. It's been a long 2 years. And thanks for attending my chat here on accessibility and broadcasting, how AMI Audio uses WheatNet Navigator and ScreenBuilder and other technologies to assist low vision and blind presenters and technicians. And I know that's a real mouthful, but trust me when I say it's way shorter than my original working title was. And I hope that everyone's going to find some takeaways that may help if you have some low vision or blind people on your staff. So as Adam said, my name is Leanne Brown, and I'm a broadcast and IT systems specialist at Accessible Media Inc. in Toronto. But I was hired primarily for my 20-plus years of experience in radio and audio. Working in a not-for-profit facility and being able to serve a community that has been and continues to be drastically underrepresented has been a really fulfilling way to spend my last 6 years so far in broadcast engineering. A little bit of history first. For those that don't know who AMI is, we are Accessible Media, or AMI, and we're a not-for-profit media company, and our mandate is to entertain, inform, and empower Canadians that are blind or partially sighted. And we operate 3 broadcast services. One of them is AMI Audio. And then there is AMI TV in English, and our French station, AMI Télé. AMI's vision is to establish and support a voice for Canadians with disabilities, representing their interests, concerns, and values through accessible media reflection and portrayal. AMI was actually established way back in 1989 as the National Broadcast Reading Service, some of you may remember that name, when the Canadian Parliament Standing Committee on the Status of Disabled Persons stated that vision and print-restricted Canadians must have equal access to published news and information. In 1990, the CRTC granted NBRS a license for VoicePrint, which was a national reading service. In 1995, NBRS launched AudioVision Canada, supplying described video services to various film and television projects. In 2007, the CRTC granted NBRS a license for TAC, the Accessible Channel, which was a national specialty channel which would air all of its programming with described video and closed captioning. And TAC launched in 2009, and for anybody that knows anything about Braille, that is the Braille version of TAC there on the screen. So with all that expansion, NBRS was named Accessible Media in 2010. TAC was renamed AMI TV. VoicePrint was renamed AMI Audio, and we launched the DV Guide, which is an online TV listing service highlighting programs across Canadian broadcasters that feature audio descriptions. In 2014, we added our French language TV station, AMI Télé. In 2018, we launched apps for iOS and tvOS, providing yet another means of consuming AMI TV's original content. And some of the app's features include accessibility enhancements such as bolded text and high contrast layouts. In 2020, AMI delved into the world of podcasting. Content and social media engagement can be found on the usual popular platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And AMI's broadcast services are also all classified as 91H must carry, which means that by law they must be carried on the basic tier of all digital television services in the country. And that's where we get our funding from through a portion of every cable subscription across the country. So AMI Audio, in particular, which I'm here to talk about today, is carried on all basic TV subscription tiers as an audio-only service. We also have a live online website, a web stream on the AMI.ca website, and we're hosted on popular streaming services such as TuneIn and Radio Player Canada. We're also available on all major podcasting platforms. And AMI Audio offers a mix of live original programming and readings from a selection of magazines and newspapers read by professional narrators like Lloyd Robertson, Jim Van Horn, and Roger Ashby. Now, notable live programming on AMI Audio includes our weekday morning show, Now with Dave Brown. And Now is currently a simulcast show on AMI Audio and AMI TV. It runs from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern and features news of the day, technology, and current events. You can hear regional information from community reporters across the country from the blind and partially sighted community, as well as segments with political commentator Craig Oliver, film critic Michael McNeely, and tech updates with Cool Blind Tech's Nelson Rigo. Podcasts from the show can be downloaded off of iTunes. Live weekdays at 2 p.m., we feature Kelly & Company with hosts Kelly McDonald and Ramya Amuthan. And Kelly & Company focuses on arts, entertainment, and lifestyle information. And again, contributors from across the country share everything from finance to fashion and gaming, the latest in audiobooks and accessible tech. Later this year, Kelly & Company will be launching their new live TV show, which will also be simulcast on AMI Audio. And now what Dave Brown is going to move to a TV-only show. Other great original programs include The Pulse with Joeita Gupta from the CBC, and that takes listeners deeper into the heart of important stories that affect the disability community. And we have Double Tap Canada for the latest on accessible technology, and also The Neutral Zone, hosted by Brock Richardson, and that features the latest news and information about pro and para sports. And this list only scratches the surface of original programming offered on AMI Audio, and anyone who wants more information to the broadcast schedule or to do some listening can find it at ami.ca/listen. Now, of course, all of this programming couldn't be produced without the staff and hosts of audio technicians, some of whom are fully sighted, but some who are partially sighted or fully blind. And this has presented some real challenges over my last 6 years at AMI. Wheatstone Products, in particular, along with some help from others, has been a huge part of making all of it more accessible. Now, when I first arrived at AMI in 2016, they were just transitioning from an Axia system, no offense to the Axia folks here, to a Wheatstone E1 console and a redesigned control room and master studio designed and installed by Richard Sondermeyer of GS Broadcast Technical Services. And some of the improvements for our low vision hosts and techs would not have been possible without the help of Richard and his fantastic crew. So here first is a picture of our original Studio 5, pictured here in the pre-Wheatstone days. So you can see the studio had the mica arms with the small red on-air indicator rings, which not only is that hard for a low vision person to see, those arms junked up the space and got in the way of everything and everybody. So when we asked Richard if he could design something that could be used with mics on bases and stands and be an on-air indicator, we got this awesome custom build. So not only is this easier for low vision people to see, the mics on short stands and bases makes it much easier for a low vision or blind host or guest to orient themselves in relation to the mic position and height just using their hands. And our Wheatstone TS4 talent stations are also labeled with braille tape so that a blind user knows which controls do what. For those, the bus minus settings that you see there, the LXE BM15, those are dedicated for each station so they can't accidentally be changed. And in the control room, there is a standard console layout that's used by all of the audio techs that loads the mic sources on the proper surface channels which match the talent station bus minus assignments so that all of the talkback and on-off functions and the logic work properly. And also braille tape on a mic base lets a host or a guest know which mic they're sitting in front of. In our audio control room, we call it ACR. We also have some visual and auditory aids for vision impaired and sighted technicians. We have a large on-air indicator mounted on the windowsill directly in front of their console, and a large format master clock mounted behind the automation system screens. And we also have a SonAlert buzzer for when they forget to press their program to air button on the LXE when they're transitioning into live programming and dreaded silence ensues in the program chain. Now, in October of 2020, we upgraded from the E1 and installed an 18-channel LXE service. And one of the primary reasons we did this was because of the entire spectrum of color choices available that can make things much easier for a low-vision tech to see and to operate. And it's on my to-do list later this year to create a custom layer or write a script that can change all of the usual button colors you see there to darker ones that are generally easier for a low-vision person to see. And our existing E1 console now lives in our Studio 2, and it's used for pre-recordings, podcastings, and some live co-hosting duties. The question is, what about a fully blind person? How do we make it possible for them to sit down in front of this console and tech a live show on their own? Could I go ahead and braille tape the entire console, every button cap, and every fader channel? Probably, and I've given it some thought, but more on that issue in just a bit. Currently, for our low vision techs, here are some of the things that we've done with the WheatNet Navigator software as well as ScreenBuilder to make things easier to operate in person or remotely. Now, thanks primarily to the excellent presentation that Neil Ostin of Rogers Sports and Media did for WABI 2021, Pointing North, WheatNet Navigator in practical terms, we were able to come up with some custom views that make it much easier for a low vision person to make use of when they need to. This is our global view right now of our entire system. And it froze on me. And now it doesn't want to play. Try again. There we go. Now, for a fully sighted person like myself, that's a pretty large grid to try and make your way through, and we only have 14 blades on our system right now because we're a pretty small operation. This makes it really hard for a low vision user to check or move a cross point if they need to, even if they're using the Windows magnifier tool, because only a small portion of the entire grid can be seen at any given time. And it's even harder when they're teching their shows remotely from home and they're AnyDesking into our Navigator PC to try and do this. So now there is a single view for the E1 and Studio 2 related items, and a single view for the ACR and LXE surface-related items. And as you can see, it's an incredibly scaled-down version of the things they use frequently with only a tiny bit of XY grid overrun there in the corner. You'll also notice that all of our blades are colored in much darker colors available in the Navigator Preferences color palette. Again, in general, low vision people find it easier to see and work with the darker colors in the spectrum than the lighter ones, especially if the application does not support color inversion. With Wheatstone's ScreenBuilder software, we've been able to build some pretty cool screens that make it easier for our low vision techs to do what they need to do, and they're so cool that even the full vision techs make use of them. This screen here runs in our Studio 2, the Studio 2 selectors icon there in the middle of the screen. And each set of buttons you'll see again is colored in the darker spectrum for easier viewing. Because the two studios often need to share the same sources, when this screen launches, the script in the background goes and checks our whole WheatNet system. And when it determines which console, the LXE or the E1, has all of the necessary connections in the crosspoint map for the source in question, the corresponding console button on the screen will be lit in green and the alternate console button will be lit in red. So looking at a single source, Comrex 2 up there in the right, we can see that currently the LXE has all the required crosspoints. The Comrex 2 source is on the correct LXE fader, and the correct LXE bus minus is going back to the Comrex 2 destination. Now, if a tech in Studio 2 requires that source for a pre-recording, all they have to do is click the E1 button on the screen, and all the required crosspoints will be made for the E1 console. The E1 button will turn green, and the LXE button will turn red. And then when they're done, they can push the LXE button again, which will send all the connections back to the LXE console and turn the LXE button green again. Our full vision techs will very often make use of this panel as well because it's an easy one-step solution for them to push all of the connections they need back to the LXE console for live shows and pre-records compared to recalling a preset or manually making crosspoints in Navigator. Now, if both buttons are red, you can see a couple of those there, or there's a button that's gray, it usually means that the source in question is either been moved to a different channel on that console or is not loaded on a console channel at all. But in any case, whatever source you want on whatever console you want, push the button and it's going to make those connections that you need. Now, on the same screen, there's also a custom choice option up in the right-hand corner for sources that might not be used as frequently. And a tech can choose the source and channel destination and hit the take button. And if the connection is successful, the take button is going to turn green. Then when they're done that, they would select the correct bus minus to go back to the destination, and if that connection's successful, the take button will turn green again. Now, the Studio 2 default button is a quick recall of their standard E1 layout, and this relieves the need for a low-vision tech to try and navigate that small VGA screen that's embedded in an E1 console or through the Glass E interface. When that button's pressed, if the Studio 2 default event is recalled successfully, the button turns green for 5 seconds and then returns to gray. And then down below that, there's another choice box for the other E1 event recalls, and it's the same deal. You select the event from the drop-down, click the take button, and if it's recalled correctly, the take button turns green for 5 seconds and then returns to gray. Some of the other screens I have in progress that I'm working on are a larger view of the LXE event recalls, plus the buttons they use for switching between live and automated programming. And also a scaled-down mixer of only 8 of the 18 LXE channels that one of our low-vision techs needs for the live show that she produces. Now, as mentioned earlier, I plan to do a deeper dive into the layers function of the LXE for this mixer, where all of the surface buttons can be set to more accessible colors. Going back to a few minutes ago when I asked the question, could I just braille tape the entire console? Well, the answer to that is yes, I could. Or I could ask Wheatstone about the possibility of some custom-etched braille switch caps. With either of those options, and because our layout is generally fixed as far as where sources get loaded, I could certainly make it possible for a fully blind person to operate a show if all they needed was the console and some web GUIs for codec connections. The problem actually lies with most of the other software applications that a technician would use in order to operate a live show. Adobe Audition, Xscreen for Telos, most automation playout systems, Navigator and ScreenBuilder, just to name a few. So I did some testing with NVDA, which is an open source screen reader for Windows, on some of the applications that we use. NVDA, by the way, stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access. Now, if the application has an integrated web GUI like Comrex Access, or Comrex Opal, NVDA will read everything on those screens and make it possible for a blind user to navigate, connect to another unit, or set up an invite, copy the link, and send it. Xscreen for the Telos system gets a partially readable score. NVDA can detect the different sections of that application window, but not actually read the text that's there. For example, if I hover over that line 1 box, what NVDA gives me back is interface.viewModel.lineVM. And if I do the same on the upper control boxes like screener or producer, NVDA gives me back system.windows.controls.listBoxItem, which isn't really useful information to a blind or low-tech person. The Glass E application for connecting to our E1 service also gets a partial for accessibility to NVDA. NVDA will read everything on that screen, but I found out the hard way that you have to be careful how you name things, because right now NVDA reads that service name as Studio 2 times 10 to the power of first, which kind of makes it sound like Studio 2's got some superpowers that the other studios don't, but that's a fixable option, and I plan to fix that as well. But once the connection is actually made to the Glass E interface, those panels are unreadable by NVDA with the exception of the information in this main connection status window there. And moving on to our playout system, which is DJB Zone. AIR, and we also use the zone production application. And I'm not here to try and pick on the fine folks at Ron Paley Broadcast in any way. This is simply what we use, and it's what I had for testing. But I know from experience that most of the other automation systems are pretty much the same. Wide orbit, RCS, they are either only a little bit accessible or not accessible at all to screen readers. So unfortunately, these applications are generally inaccessible to the screen reader beyond the basic menu drop-downs that you'd get common to most applications, file, edit, that type of thing. And it would be amazing for NVDA to have the ability, or another screen reader, to be able to arrow down or tab through or mouse hover over the different sections and have the titles of the sequential playlist be read back, or the titles of the hotkeys down at the bottom, or to be able to navigate through the audio library in order to insert clips into the playlist. And the same thing would be great in the Zone Production app, so that blind text could have the ability to upload cuts into the database, set their segue points or trim silence and all the other things they do. The screen reader will read the editable fields like the category drop-down, but everything else just reads AMI window. The same issue, again, presents itself with the WheatNet ScreenBuilder application. NVDA will read everything there. It will read all of the regular menu selections. It will read all of the placed widgets entries and all of their associated drop-downs. It'll even read the hue values and HTML color codes from the color selection palette. But when it comes to the layout for building the custom screens, or running the standalone screen itself, NVDA can't access any of that information. And if we go back to the Studio 2 selector screen we built as an example, NVDA can read the title of it when it's launched, and it can read that X to close it up at the top, but it cannot read any of the label information or any of the button text information. And now I have some examples of software applications that are screen reader accessible. This is the Reaper DAW application, and it's fully accessible thanks to the great work of James Tay and some other contributors who wrote an extension for Reaper called OSARA, Open Source Accessibility for the Reaper application. And that is supported on both Windows and Mac operating systems. Here's just a partial list of supported actions that OSARA makes possible, and I had to shrink this down to 50% of the window to get this screen grab. And this list goes on for pages. And if you'd like to take a deeper look into what this extension is capable of, you can find it at osara.reaperaccessibility.com. With this one extension, AMI has 2 fully blind audio editors creating content on a daily basis. For me, as a fully sighted individual, I really need the waveform representation to edit properly, and the fact that our 2 techs can do it simply by ear and do it better than some of our fully sighted editors is worthy of mad respect in my books. The Studio Recorder application is also accessible to screen readers. Pro Tools has come a long way as far as accessibility is concerned, partially due to its native voiceover app that is still a benchmark application for many accessibility users, but also due to the work put into Flow Tools, enhanced workflow for Pro Tools users with visual impairments. And this, like the one like OSARA for Reaper, is only a partial list of the enhancements provided by the scripts for Pro Tools users. And for more information on Flow Tools, flowtools.org. At the Royal National Institute of Blind People in the UK, they have a radio station called RNIB Connect, and all of their staff are blind or visually impaired. And Alan Russell, seen here, says, while the studio is not completely accessible, it's used because RNIB wants presenters to be able to use mainstream equipment should the opportunity to work at a station like Radio 2 arise. The playout system, RCS, that we use for promos, adverts, music, and to schedule shows is accessible to a point. Over at Mushroom FM, which is an internet station in New Zealand, they use station playlist software. And Daryl Pascal from Mushroom FM says, Station Playlist, which makes professional software for the broadcasting industry, has always been mindful of accessibility needs. Station Playlist Studio has many advanced features and can handle the whole process of broadcasting, from playing music and managing schedules to connecting to the internet radio stream and monitoring listening levels. Brian Hartkin from the station Team FM has worked to build add-ons and adaptations with Station Playlist software, which makes it even more accessible to use. And from Brian Hartkin at Team FM, I'm a computer programmer by trade, and in the last 10 years, I've made many adaptations to the Station Playlist software to make it more accessible both for myself, my wife Lulu, and the rest of the crew at Team FM. These adaptations are also available for people who are blind or who have sight loss and work at other radio stations. I write JAWs for Windows scripts as my day job, and so some of the accessibility measures are about getting the Station Playlist suite communicating with JAWs more clearly to improve accessibility for everyone. We refine accessibility as the need arises. We now sell the adaptations as part of our consultancy company. Without such adaptations, blind people have to rely either on a human assistance or convoluted methods to put together a radio show. A good example would be having to quickly learn how long a music track still has to run. Without using the JAWS script we've created, that is a very slow and complex thing to do. So in closing, I'm here today not only to show the kind of things that can already be done, but also to make a plea to software developers to please make your applications more usable and functional to those in the accessible needs community. Please make them accessible via tools like Magnifier, or make your software possible to color invert the application for low vision users. Please make them accessible to at least the open source screen readers like NVDA and VoiceOver. Please follow the lead of the OSARA and FlowTools teams and open up your products to a whole market of users you may have been unaware were even there until now. As Adam said earlier, CBC uses software off the shelf sometimes and says, but we need it to do this, this, and this. Accessibility users need these types of software to do this, this, and this as well. And the great low vision and blind technicians I work with at AMI are, quite frankly, some of the most talented broadcasters I've ever worked with in my 25-plus year career. They're passionate about serving their community of listeners and viewers, and they want the ability to access the full scope of broadcasting and content creation tools to make their content even better, but we need everybody in the software industries to help us out. And finally, to wrap up, I'd like to give another huge shout out to Neil Ostin of Rogers Sports and Media. Without his help, guidance, and extreme patience, the screens we have so far would not have been possible. As mentioned earlier, if you're a WheatNet Navigator user and you haven't checked out his WABI 2021 presentation, Pointing North, WheatNet Navigator in Practical Terms, I highly recommend the watch. And thanks for listening.